It was a quiet day on the edge of the galaxy. The stars twinkled like tiny diamonds scattered across the endless black sky. Humanity had spread its wings far and wide, settling on distant planets, building cities, and thriving across vast stretches of space. They had conquered worlds, and nothing seemed impossible. But today, something was different. Something had changed. A single message came through the communication channels, sent from a distant colony on the farthest edge of space. It was simple, but it carried an unmistakable weight. They are coming. The message sent shockwaves through the entire galaxy, reaching every corner of human civilization. It didn't need to say more. Every person, every commander, every soldier knew what it meant. The eye was coming. No one really knew what the eye was. It wasn't just a ship, a weapon, or an army. It was something far worse. Stories of the eye had been passed down for generations, but they were always dismissed as just that, stories. Myths. The tales spoke of an ancient force, a being that lived beyond time, one whose mere gaze could destroy entire worlds. Civilizations had fallen to it, and there were no survivors. The eye didn't need to invade. All it needed to do was look, and when it did, everything would crumble. A quiet panic spread among the human colonies as the message continued to spread. Military leaders rushed to make plans, scientists scrambled to understand what was happening, and civilians gathered in fear, unsure of what was to come. But for all their technology, their weapons, and their ships, there was nothing they could do to stop it. On a small, isolated colony called Valor, a group of soldiers stood together on the observation deck, staring out into the vastness of space. The once bustling colony had fallen eerily silent, as if it too understood the gravity of the situation. The city below was still, with only a few lights flickering in the distance. It felt like the calm before the storm. Captain Emma Hayes, the leader of the Valor Defense Force, stood at the front of the group. She had been in countless battles, facing every threat imaginable, but nothing had prepared her for this. Her face was stern, but the worry in her eyes was hard to hide. She had heard the stories, just like everyone else. But now, those stories were becoming a terrifying reality. "Are we sure about this?" one of the soldiers asked quietly, his voice laced with fear. "I mean, the eye, is it real?" Captain Hayes turned to face him, her expression hardening. "It's real, and we don't have the luxury of doubt anymore." She knew the history, just like everyone else. The eye had come before long ago, but it had never reached human space. This was different. The reports from distant systems were all the same. Entire planets had been wiped out in an instant. Cities reduced to rubble, life wiped away as if it had never existed. No weapons, no shields, no defense could stop the eye. "Get ready," she ordered, her voice sharp. "We'll have to be prepared for anything." As she spoke, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath them. The entire colony seemed to tremble in response, as if the planet itself was reacting to the approaching terror. It was an unsettling feeling. There were no signs of invasion, no spaceships in the sky, no fleets of warships, just silence, and the knowledge that the eye was coming, far above them, on the observation deck. The sky began to change. At first, it was subtle, just a flicker of light in the distance. But soon, the lights grew stronger, shifting in unnatural patterns. It wasn't like any star they had ever seen. It was something else, something older, something more powerful. The lights began to swirl, forming shapes that couldn't be explained. The ground continued to shake, and an oppressive feeling hung in the air. "Captain," one of the soldiers called out urgently. "It's here." Captain Hayes turned to face the horizon, her heart pounding. The air felt thick, as if it was pushing against her, testing her will. And then she saw it. A massive, swirling energy, dark and endless, moving toward them like a wave crashing down on the shore. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a fleet. It was just the eye. The swirling mass of light and dark continued to grow larger. It was almost as if time itself was slowing down. As the energy neared, the planet's atmosphere started to shimmer and warp. The stars in the sky seemed to blink out one by one, as though they were afraid to remain in the eye's presence. The silence that had hung over the world deepened, thickening with every passing second. Captain Hayes took a deep breath. This was it. There would be no more waiting, no more hiding. The eye had arrived, The soldiers around her gripped their weapons tightly, but deep down, they knew nothing they did would matter. There was no way to fight this. This was beyond them. The stories were true. The eye was real, and it was here to judge them all. But one thing was certain. Humanity would not go down without a fight. For the first time in years, Captain Hayes felt the weight of helplessness bear down on her shoulders. She had led soldiers into battle before, but never against something like this. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing, whatever it was. They would face it together. There was no turning back now. The eye was here, and humanity's fate hung in the balance. The first signs of the eye's arrival had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. In every corner of human civilization, people had been left frozen in fear. No one could prepare for something like this, something that wasn't just a warship or alien invaders, but a force of nature itself. It was as if the universe had sent a reminder of its unfathomable power, a warning that even humanity, with all its advances, was still fragile, on valor. The tension in the air was unbearable. The soldiers, once confident and battle-hardened, now stood in disbelief, their eyes trained on the swirling darkness growing larger in the sky. The familiar hum of everyday life had gone silent, replaced by the unsettling vibrations of the ground beneath their feet. Everyone was waiting for something, anything that might stop this. But no help was coming. The eye was too powerful, too ancient, too inevitable. Captain Emma Hayes stood at the observation deck, staring at the horizon where the storm of energy was rapidly approaching. Her heart was racing, but she kept her face calm, steady. As a leader, she couldn't afford to show fear. The men and women under her command needed to see hope, even if it was fading. The first message came through the comms. A voice, distorted by static, crackled across the channel. "We've lost contact with Alpha Base. It's gone. The eye is here." There was no further explanation. No more words. The comms went dead. The silence that followed was more deafening than any explosion. Emma's mind raced. She had heard the legends, the stories that had been passed down through generations. But those were just stories, weren't they? Tales whispered around campfires or spoken in hushed tones in far-off libraries. Everyone knew about the eye, the creature, the entity, the force of pure destruction that had wiped out entire civilizations in the past. But this was real. "Captain, we have a transmission," a voice called from behind her. One of the communications officers had been frantically trying to establish contact with nearby colonies, but it was no use. The eye was already interfering with their systems. She turned to face him. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he held the transmission receiver. He was sweating, but his eyes were wide with a strange mixture of awe and terror. "It's from the Galadar system," he said, voice cracking. They've encountered the eye too. The message, it's only 2 words, but it's clear. It sees, that's all." Emma's heart skipped a beat. It sees. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a truth. The eye wasn't just something to be feared, it was an intelligence, a presence, something that could perceive everything in its path. It sees everything. Emma muttered to herself. It wasn't just looking at them. It was watching, understanding. But why? Why had it chosen to come now? And why had it chosen them? What did it want from humanity? Her mind buzzed with questions, but the only answer that came was the cold, undeniable truth. There was nothing they could do to stop it. No weapon, no defense system, no fleet of ships could fight something like this. It didn't matter if they gathered their strongest forces. It didn't matter if they built weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. None of it mattered. The eye wasn't here to fight, it was here to test. A voice broke her train of thought. It was her second in command, Lieutenant Marcus Lee. He had a quiet confidence, the kind that only came from years of battle experience. But now, his face showed nothing but uncertainty. "We can't just sit here. We need to do something. We need to prepare. We need to fight." Emma looked at him, her expression softening for a moment. "What's left to fight, Marcus? The eye isn't just a threat. It's an ancient power that can't be stopped by force alone. It's here for a reason, and we don't understand it. But we can't just surrender," Marcus shot back, his voice rising. "We have to try. We've faced enemies before. We've fought wars. We've never faced anything like this," Emma interrupted sharply. "This isn't a war we can win with guns and ships. This isn't something we can outsmart or outrun." There was a long silence between them as they both turned to look out at the horizon. The eye was drawing closer. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a creature. It was an energy, a force unlike anything they had ever seen. It didn't move through space like any known object. It seemed to simply exist. A swirling mass of light and dark that bent the very fabric of reality around it. The longer they watched, the more it seemed to consume everything in its path, leaving nothing but empty space behind. "Maybe there's still a way," Marcus said after a moment. "Quieter now. Maybe if we understand it, maybe then we can find a way to survive." Emma nodded, her gaze hardening. "I'm going to reach out. We need to learn what we're dealing with before it's too late." As she spoke, a strange hum filled the air, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift once more. The eye's influence was already stretching beyond the horizon, sending waves of energy through the atmosphere. It wasn't just an enemy. It was a presence, one that could warp reality, bending the laws of physics. And as it drew nearer, Emma knew that humanity's fate would not be decided by their weapons or their plans. It would be decided by something much deeper, much older. They would have to face the eye, not with their might, but with their minds, their courage, and their very essence. Her fingers hovered over the controls, ready to initiate a communication with the eye itself, but she hesitated. The stories said that to look upon the eye was to invite destruction. But what if they could reach it? What if they could understand it? She had no choice. She had to try. The ship's communication system buzzed to life, and for a moment, Emma's breath caught. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was about to make contact with the entity that had brought fear to countless civilizations. The eye was here, and humanity's fate rested on what happened next. But as she reached out, she knew one thing for sure: the encounter with the eye would change everything, for better or for worse. The silence that followed the communication attempt was suffocating. Emma sat in the darkened control room, her fingers hovering over the console. The hum of the ship's systems was almost comforting compared to the overwhelming tension that hung in the air. Everyone on Valor had been waiting for a response, hoping for a miracle that would come in the form of communication, or even a sign of weakness from the eye. But that hope quickly faded. No message came through. No voice responded. The eye remained silent, its presence growing closer with each passing moment. Emma leaned back in her chair, staring at the dark screen in front of her. The universe felt smaller now, as if it were closing in around her. She had spent her life preparing for battles, studying tactics, understanding enemy strategies, commanding troops, but this was different. This wasn't a battle. It was an encounter with something that defied every rule she had ever learned. The stories had been true, but not in the way anyone had expected. The eye wasn't a conqueror. It wasn't here to invade. It was something much more unsettling. "Captain," Marcus's voice broke the silence. She turned to see him standing by the door, his expression unreadable. "We've been scanning it. There's no way to comprehend what it is. The readings don't make sense. It's like the laws of physics are bending around it." Emma nodded slowly, her mind racing. "That's not possible. Nothing bends space like that. Nothing we've ever seen. It's like it's rewriting reality itself. We think we've located its core," Marcus continued. "But it's not a ship. It's not even a being. He paused, searching for the right words. "It's a consciousness, an intelligence that's beyond our understanding." Emma stood up, moving to the window. Outside, the sky was no longer the same. It was as if the stars themselves were flickering, dimming, one by one. A vast, swirling storm loomed above the planet, like a black hole with tendrils reaching out to consume everything in its path. It wasn't the kind of storm they could prepare for with weapons or shields. This was something far beyond their capacity to fight. She looked back at Marcus. "So it's not a force we can fight. It's a force we have to understand." "Exactly," Marcus said. "The eye isn't here to destroy us. At least, not in the way we thought. It's here to test us, to see if we're worthy of existing." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors, whispered fears that humanity might one day face something like this. But now that it was real, it was too much to process all at once. This wasn't just a challenge of survival. This was an existential trial. "Has anyone tried communicating with it directly?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus shook his head. We've tried everything. But when we attempt to make contact, it's like the connection is blocked, as if it's aware of our intentions before we even try. Emma closed her eyes, trying to make sense of it all. What could a being that could manipulate reality, that could exist beyond time itself, want from humanity? What was the purpose of this trial? The eye hadn't destroyed them yet, but it felt like something much worse was at stake, something far more complicated than just their survival. Captain, Marcus said, his voice now urgent, I think I've found something. There's a pattern, a signal coming from the core of the eye. It's faint, but it looks like it's trying to communicate with us. Emma's heart raced. Can you decode it? We're working on it, but it's not like any language we've encountered. It's alien, and not just in the way we think of aliens. It's almost like it's not speaking in words, but in emotions, in raw concepts. Emma's eyes widened. What does it want? Marcus hesitated. That's the strange part. The signal, if you could even call it that, seems to be looking for something. Not from us, but through us. Emma stared at him, confused. Looking for something through us? What does that mean? I think it's using us. The way we use a microscope to look at something too small to see. The eye is looking through us to understand something. Something it's been searching for. Emma's mind began to race. Could it be that the destruction the eye brought wasn't its true goal? Could it be that it wasn't just testing humanity? Maybe, somehow, humanity was the key to solving something much larger. Something the eye had been struggling to understand for eons. Before she could ask more questions, a loud crackle erupted through the ship's comms. The voice that came through was distorted, but clear enough to understand. This is Commander Alistair of the Nevik fleet. We've made contact with the eye. It's not what we thought. It's the message cut off, replaced by static. Emma's pulse quickened. Another fleet had made contact. Was this the moment when they would finally understand what the eye was? She turned to Marcus. Is there any way to trace that signal? She asked. We're trying, but it's being blocked. The eye is pushing us away, forcing us to see only what it wants us to. She clenched her fists, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just a test of strength or survival. It was a test of understanding, of perception. The eye was trying to see something through humanity, and every decision they made would either help or hinder that search. We have to try again, she said, determination in her voice. We have to reach it. We have to understand what it's really after. Marcus nodded, his face grim. But this time, we need to be prepared. We're not just dealing with a threat. We're dealing with something that can change the very fabric of reality. We need to be ready for anything. Emma turned back to the window, watching the storm of the eye grow ever closer. The time for running or hiding was over. The fate of humanity depended on what happened next. They would have to face it, not with weapons or force, but with their minds, their understanding, and their will to survive. And as the eye loomed closer, Emma realized one terrifying truth. The real challenge had only just begun. The tension in the air was unbearable. Every passing second felt heavier than the last. Emma stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the swirling mass of energy that had become the eye. It was so close now, so overwhelmingly present, that it felt as if the entire universe had been drawn into its pull. The vastness of space, once filled with endless possibilities, now seemed to shrink under its weight. The crew around her was silent, waiting for something, anything that might tell them how to survive. But there were no answers. The eye had offered none. All they had were the cryptic messages, the vague patterns, and the growing sense of something far more dangerous lurking beneath it all. We're running out of time. Marcus's voice broke the stillness. His face was drawn, as if the weight of what they were facing had aged him years in a matter of hours. We can't keep waiting for it to make a move. We need to act. Emma nodded, her mind racing. Act how? What can we do against something like this? He turned to her, his eyes tired but determined. We try to communicate. We try to understand. Whatever this thing wants from us, it's not going to stop until it gets it. A strange shiver ran down Emma's spine. The thought of reaching out to something that could warp reality itself sent a chill through her. What if this was all a test? What if the eye wasn't a destroyer but a judge? An ancient being trying to determine humanity's worth? The implications were too vast to process all at once. We've already tried to reach it, Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "What makes you think it will listen now?" "Because we're running out of options," Marcus said, his words filled with urgency. "We either act, or we wait for it to destroy us. There's no in-between." Emma's gaze shifted to the viewport. The eye had grown larger. It was no longer just a swirling mass of darkness. It was becoming something more, something tangible. It seemed to pulse, the energy rippling like the surface of an ocean disturbed by unseen forces. It felt like it was alive, watching them, studying them. They were no longer observers of a distant threat. They were at the center of it, caught in the gravitational pull of something ancient and incomprehensible. "We can't just keep throwing ourselves at it," Emma said, her voice trembling with frustration. "We need more than hope. We need a plan." Marcus's eyes flickered as he thought, and then, in a moment of realization, he spoke. "What if it's not looking for a fight? What if it's trying to communicate in a way we don't understand? What if we're missing the most important part of this whole encounter, the thing that could give us a chance to survive?" Emma turned to him sharply. "What are you saying?" "Maybe we're looking at it all wrong," Marcus said, his voice growing more confident. "What if it's not here to judge us based on strength or ability? What if it's here to judge something deeper, our spirit, our will to survive?" Emma's mind raced as she processed his words. The eye had never shown any sign of aggression. It hadn't attacked, hadn't even directly interacted with them in any meaningful way. It had only tested them, observing their reactions, their fears. It had always been watching, but never striking. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe this wasn't about violence at all. Maybe it was about something more fundamental. That she met Marcus's gaze, a spark of understanding igniting between them. "You think it's testing our will to survive?" "I don't just think it," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I'm sure of it. The eye is a force of nature, not something we can defeat with weapons or tactics. But if it's testing us, then we need to show it something it hasn't seen before. We need to show it that humanity is more than just a species that can fight. We're a species that can endure. We're survivors." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. They both knew the stakes. If the eye was truly testing humanity, then this trial was more than just a battle for survival. It was a test of their very essence, what made them human. The eye was watching, judging, and humanity's fate depended on how they responded. Emma turned toward the communications console, her fingers hovering over the controls. "We need to reach out again. But this time it's different. This time, we show it who we are." Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady. "We show it our resilience, our will to live, our determination. We don't give up. We don't bend." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she began to initiate the connection. This wasn't like before. There would be no fear, no hesitation. She would reach out to the eye, not as a soldier or a commander, but as a human being. She would show it the strength of humanity's spirit. The ship's systems hummed to life as the connection was established. The screen flickered, and for a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, just as it had before, the eye appeared. It wasn't a physical entity, it was something more. A vast, swirling presence of pure energy that filled the screen. But this time, Emma wasn't afraid. She stared at it, her eyes unwavering. She was ready. "We are humanity." She spoke clearly into the comms, her voice strong and unwavering. "We have faced countless trials, and we've survived them all. We are not here to destroy, but to endure. We will not bend to fear. We will not give in." The eye pulsed, its energy shifting in a way that almost felt like a response. The ship trembled, the air thick with anticipation. Emma's heart raced, but she didn't look away. This was the moment. Humanity's will, tested before the most powerful force the universe had ever known. For a long moment, there was silence. And then, the voice came. It was not a voice they expected. It was not alien or cold. It was understanding. "You are resilient. You have faced the darkness and refused to surrender. This is your test, and you have passed." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Had they done it? Had they truly passed the test? The eye's presence shifted, expanding, folding into something less threatening, something more harmonious. The storm in the sky above Valor began to calm, the pulse of energy stabilizing. But as the tension eased, Emma knew the real challenge was only just beginning. The eye might have accepted humanity's will to survive, but the future was still uncertain. The test was not over. It had only just begun to reveal its true purpose. The storm had passed, but its mark would remain forever. The calm that had followed the eye's recognition of humanity's will to endure was almost unnerving. The storm that had once raged across the sky above Valor had dissipated, leaving only a strange, unsettling stillness in its wake. It was as if the universe had taken a collective breath, waiting for the next step in a game it had yet to fully reveal. Emma stood in the command center, her hands clenched at her sides, still trying to process everything that had just happened. The eye had acknowledged their strength, their resilience, but that wasn't the end of it. The message was clear. The trial was not over. In fact, it was only beginning. Marcus stood next to her, his expression just as serious, his eyes distant as he stared at the now calm sky. "What do you think it means?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That it accepted us?" Emma shook her head, not entirely sure herself. "It's not a victory. It's a step. The eye doesn't simply stop. It never stops. We've passed one part of the test, but that doesn't mean we're safe." A sense of dread hung in the air, an invisible weight that pressed down on the shoulders of everyone in the room. They had been given a chance, a rare opportunity to prove themselves, but Emma could feel in her bones that there was something far more dangerous waiting in the shadows. The eye might have spared them for now, but she knew that something much worse was coming. "We need to be ready," Marcus said, his voice low but steady. "Whatever comes next, we need to face it head on." The ship's communications system flickered to life. The voice that came through wasn't distorted. As they had come to expect from the eye, it was clear, calm, almost serene. But the words it spoke sent a chill down Emma's spine. "Humanity." The voice echoed across the room, its tone both comforting and terrifying at once. "You have endured, but now you must face your deepest fear. For the truth lies not in survival alone, but in the strength of your heart." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The eye had spoken directly to them again. But what did it mean by their deepest fear? She glanced at Marcus, her mind racing. "The truth lies in the strength of your heart," she muttered under her breath. "What does that mean? What kind of test is this?" Before Marcus could respond, the ship's main display blinked to life, showing a strange, shifting pattern, an intricate web of symbols and images that seemed to spiral inward. Like a vortex, it was not just a transmission. It was a message, a challenge. "Prepare yourselves," the voice continued. "To face your fear, you must confront it, not with weapons or power, but with your spirit. Your deepest fear lies within you, and it will take all that you are to overcome it. Only then will you truly understand your place in the universe." The room fell silent as the crew members exchanged uneasy glances. The meaning of the words was clear. The eye was offering them one final trial, a test that wasn't physical, but psychological, a test of their innermost fears. Emma felt her heart race as she stared at the display. The symbols were growing more complex, the images more vivid. She could almost feel the pull of the vortex drawing her in, urging her to step into it, to confront whatever it was that awaited her. It was a terrifying feeling, one that seemed to gnaw at her very soul. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice breaking the silence, "we can't back down now. We've come this far. We need to face this, no matter what." Emma nodded, her mind whirling. She had led her crew through countless dangers, but this was different. This wasn't about strategy or force. This was a test of who they were as people, a test of their humanity. "We have no choice," Emma said, her voice steady despite the unease that was settling over her. "We've survived the impossible before, and we will do it again. But this time, we face our deepest fears not as soldiers, but as humans." The ship's systems hummed to life as the vortex on the display grew larger, consuming the screen. Emma felt an overwhelming sense of vertigo as the room seemed to shift around her. The ground beneath her feet seemed to tilt as if the ship itself were being drawn into the abyss. Suddenly, everything went black when Emma's eyes opened again. She was no longer in the command center. The familiar surroundings of the ship were gone. Instead, she found herself standing in a vast, empty field, endless and barren. The sky above was a deep shade of red, swirling with dark clouds that seemed to pulse with a strange, eerie energy. It was like nothing she had ever seen, a place that felt wrong on every level. Round her, the air was thick with an unsettling silence. There were no sounds of life, No movement told me the oppressive weight of the world pressing down on her. She felt small, insignificant in the vast emptiness. And then she saw it, a shadow, creeping across the field toward her. At first, it was nothing more than a silhouette, but as it approached, the shape became clearer. It was a figure tall, dark, and moving with a fluidity that seemed unnatural. The figure's face was obscured, but its presence was undeniable. Emma's heart began to race. This wasn't just a vision. This was a manifestation of her fear, brought to life by the eye. She tried to move, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. The figure continued to approach, its presence growing stronger, more suffocating. It wasn't just a figure, it was a representation of everything she had ever feared. The feeling of failure, the loss of control, the helplessness of being unable to protect those she loved. It was all embodied in this terrifying, dark figure. "Face it," a voice echoed through her mind, as if the eye was speaking directly to her. "Face your fear or be consumed by it." Emma felt a cold sweat form on her brow as the figure drew closer. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized that this wasn't just a test of strength. It was a test of her mind, her spirit, her very soul. She had to face this fear, this darkness, or she would be lost to it forever. With a trembling hand, she reached forward, determined not to let fear control her. She would face it. She would fight back, not with weapons, but with the one thing the eye could never take from her, her resolve. As the figure loomed over her, she took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to confront the darkness inside her once and for all. The field of darkness seemed endless, stretching far beyond the reach of Emma's sight. She stood at its heart, feeling the weight of her fear pressing against her chest. The figure before her, its shape both familiar and alien, loomed like a shadow of her own mind, a reflection of everything she had ever dreaded. She was no longer just facing a test from the eye. This was something personal, something deeply rooted in the very core of her being. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts as she stood frozen, unsure of how to confront the fear that had materialized before her. The figure didn't move. It just watched her, its dark, faceless form radiating a suffocating aura of despair. It was as if every moment she stood still, it grew stronger, pulling her into a vortex of darkness that threatened to consume her. "Face it," the voice from the eye echoed again, this time colder, sharper. "Face your darkest fear or be consumed by it." Emma's heart raced. She had fought battles on distant planets, survived the harshest environments, led her people through impossible odds, but this was different. This was not an enemy she could defeat with a weapon or strategy. This was a battle of the mind, a confrontation with her deepest, most vulnerable self. She closed her eyes, trying to center herself, trying to summon the courage she had relied on countless times before. She had to remember who she was. She had to remember what she stood for. She was a commander, a protector, a leader. But above all, she was human, and that meant facing her fear, not running from it. The figure shifted slightly, and suddenly, the air around Emma grew thick with memories she had buried deep inside her, locked away in the corners of her mind. They flooded her consciousness, drowning her in a sea of regrets, mistakes, and moments she wished she could undo. The face of a child she couldn't save, the screams of comrades who had fallen under her command, the weight of countless decisions that had led her here, to this moment, standing on the precipice of something far larger than herself. "No," Emma whispered to herself, trying to push the memories away, to shake off the guilt that clung to her like a second skin. "I can't let it control me." But the figure did not relent. It drew closer, its presence overwhelming. It was the embodiment of everything she feared: failure, loss, the endless spiral of guilt. It was the shadow that haunted her every decision, the specter that lurked behind every victory. She had faced battles before, but never one like this. Never one that threatened to tear apart the very foundation of who she was. With a surge of defiance, Emma opened her eyes and stared at the figure, refusing to let it consume her. She wasn't just going to stand there, lost in fear. She had a choice. She had the power to fight back. The figure halted just a few feet away, its presence pressing in on her, suffocating her. She could feel the fear clawing at her mind, threatening to take hold. But she wasn't going to let it. Not now, not ever. She had faced death, faced the unknown, and yet she had always emerged stronger. This time would be no different. You don't control me, Emma said aloud, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. I control my fate, not you. Not this fear. As if in response, the figure shifted once more, its shape growing darker, more menacing. It loomed over her, towering like a nightmare made flesh. But instead of retreating, Emma stepped forward, each movement filled with the quiet strength she had fought to maintain throughout her life. She would not let this fear defeat her. She would not allow it to define her. The figure seemed to falter, its dark form flickering, as if it were unsure how to respond. For a moment, it seemed to waver, unsure of how to face the strength Emma was now projecting. She was no longer a victim of her own doubts. She was a force in her own right. And this fear, this shadow, could not hold her back. The ground beneath Emma's feet began to shift, the darkness around her beginning to break apart, revealing slivers of light. The world, once cold and barren, began to feel more real, more tangible. She was no longer trapped in a nightmare. She was reclaiming control. The figure recoiled, its form disintegrating into nothingness as the light spread, pushing the darkness away. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her body trembling, but her spirit remained unbroken. She had faced the fear head-on and refused to let it consume her. She had faced the deepest corners of her own mind and emerged stronger for it. And then the light faded, and she found herself back in the command center. The ship's hum surrounding her. The vortex of fear was gone, replaced by a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity. The crew members, who had once been locked in terror, were now slowly regaining their composure. Emma looked around, meeting their eyes, and saw the same realization dawning on them. They had faced their fears, and they had survived. The eye had given them the test, and they had passed. But the journey wasn't over. The trial was just one step on a far longer path. They had shown their strength, but now they had to prove something deeper, something even more vital than their ability to endure. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the soft whir of the ship's systems. Marcus approached her, his face filled with the quiet respect of someone who had seen their leader endure a trial they had never imagined. "Are you all right, Captain?" he asked, his voice steady but concerned. Emma took a deep breath, her shoulders finally relaxing as the weight of the moment began to lift. "I'm not sure yet," she replied, her voice calm. "But we've made it this far. And we'll keep going, no matter what comes next." The challenge from the eye was far from over. But for the first time in what felt like ages, Emma felt like she was ready for whatever came next. They had faced their darkest fears and come out stronger. Now they would face whatever trials awaited them together. The silence that had fallen over the command center was like the calm before a storm. Emma stood at the helm, her fingers hovering over the controls. But she no longer felt the same sense of dread that had consumed her earlier. The test of fear had been faced, and she had emerged stronger, not just for herself, but for her crew as well. But something in the back of her mind told her this wasn't the end. The eye had tested them, yes, but its true purpose still eluded her. It had watched them, had gauged their strength and resolve, but now, after all the trials, she knew the real test was not yet complete. They had endured, they had faced their inner demons, but now they had to prove something far more crucial. "We've made it this far," Marcus said, his voice calm but filled with a quiet resolve. "But the eye is still out there. We haven't even begun to understand what it really wants." Emma nodded, her eyes scanning the empty expanse outside the ship's viewport. The storm had passed, the eerie calm still lingering in the air. The eye wasn't just a force of nature. It was something else entirely, something ancient, something that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations across time and space. What was it searching for? What did it want from them? "We need to make contact," Emma said, turning to face Marcus. "We can't keep guessing. The only way to move forward is to understand what's at stake. We need to reach out again." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You think it'll respond?" "It has to," Emma replied, her voice firm with a newfound certainty. "We've passed its tests, but now it's time to ask the right questions. We need answers." The eye had been silent since the trial, watching them from afar, as if waiting for them to make the first move. Emma had no illusions the eye wasn't an enemy they could defeat with brute force. It was a force beyond their comprehension, but it wasn't just a destroyer. There was something more, something they had yet to grasp. With a deep breath, Emma initiated the communication sequence, her hands steady despite the weight of what they were about to do. The crew gathered around, watching in silence, waiting for the inevitable moment when they would once again face the unimaginable. The screen flickered, static buzzing in the air, before it stabilized. And there it was again, the eye, but this time, it was different. It wasn't the swirling chaos they had encountered before. This time, it was calm, still, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Humanity. The voice echoed, resonating deeply in Emma's mind. It was familiar, but there was something more to it this time. Something ancient, something that seemed to reach beyond the ship, beyond space, and even time itself. "We have tested you," the voice continued, its tone softer now, almost contemplative. "And you have proven yourselves in ways no other species ever has. But your trial is not over. You have faced your fears, your weaknesses, your deepest shadows. But now you must face the truth." Emma felt a chill run through her. The truth. What truth? What had I been preparing them for? "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "What is this trial about?" There was a pause, a moment of stillness, before the voice responded, deeper this time, filled with the weight of eons. "Your survival was never the point," the eye said. "The test was not to see if you could endure or conquer. It was to see if you understood the balance between strength and sacrifice. Your kind has grown powerful, but power alone cannot shape the future of the universe. It must be tempered with wisdom, with understanding, with the willingness to give." Emma's mind raced, trying to process the enormity of what the eye was saying. It wasn't about victory. It was about something far greater, something that transcended physical strength, technology, and even willpower. The universe, the eye continued, is a vast and fragile thing. Many civilizations have come before you, each one believing they had the power to shape the future. But in the end, they were consumed by their own arrogance, their own inability to see beyond their own survival. You are different, humanity. You have endured, yes, but more importantly, you have learned to adapt, to grow, to evolve beyond yourselves. Emma felt her heart race, the weight of the words sinking in. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about humanity's place in the greater tapestry of existence. The eye's voice softened, almost as if it were speaking directly to her now. "But to truly earn your place, you must do more than just survive. You must prove that you can stand beside the other civilizations that came before you, not as conquerors, but as equals. You must show that you understand the delicate balance of life, of existence itself." She was silent for a moment, trying to process it all. The eye wasn't here to destroy them. It wasn't even here to test their physical capabilities. It was here to judge something far more profound, their ability to coexist with the universe, and all that inhabited it. "But how?" she finally asked, her voice a whisper. "How can we prove that? We are just one species, one among many in a vast universe. You are not alone," the eye responded, a hint of warmth in its voice. "Your test was never about your singular existence. It is about what you will become, what you will share with the cosmos. The universe does not revolve around any one species, no matter how powerful. But those who understand that, those who learn the balance of life, will survive beyond the confines of their own world." The words lingered in the air like a heavy fog. Emma's mind churned as she thought of all the struggles, all the wars humanity had fought to come this far. But in the grand scheme of things, in the vastness of the universe, had they truly earned their place? Or had they been too focused on their own survival to understand the greater purpose? The eye's presence seemed to soften, as if it were no longer a distant observer, but a guiding force. "You have passed the test of endurance, humanity. But your journey is far from over. You will face many more trials, many more challenges, but you have the potential to rise above them, to become something more than just survivors." With those final words, the connection ended. The screen went black, and for a moment, Emma stood there in stunned silence, her mind reeling from everything that had just transpired. The eye had spoken. Humanity had passed the test, but the real challenge, finding their place in the grand expanse of the universe, was only just beginning. "Are we ready?" Marcus's voice broke the silence, a simple question, but one that held the weight of the universe itself. Emma turned to face him, her expression a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. "I don't know," she replied softly, "but we will be."